sheets and beginning to differ. So Uthman wanted to standardize the writing of the Quran. And this is done 658. The Prophet ﷺ dies in 632. So Uthman begins to set out and standardize the Quran. And again, Zayd and 3 companions prepare. They go back to this Mus'haf of Hafsa. And they prepare the Quran according to Uthman's recommendations. And one of them was, if you differ about anything, then take the language of the Quraysh. Because there were different ways of pronouncing words. For instance, the Quraysh say mu'min, and the Bani Tamim said mu'min, like that. It's a difference. So there are different ways. The Quraysh said waduha, wallayli idha sajad, and other wallayli idha sajad. So you got differences of pronunciation. So Uthman has this project carried through and then sends copies, identical copies, to the various centers of the Muslims and the governors, and demands, as the head of the Muslim government, that all of the Qurans be burnt, except these that were based on this writing. Now this is very early, because, if you look within the Jewish tradition, the Bible, the Old Testament is really, it's gathered over about 900 years, basically, according to modern scholarship. And you have there's 4 dominant versions, like the Yahveh, the Elohim, the Sacerdotal, and you'll get some big differences. Within the Christian tradition also, the final codification is already 325 when there's an agreement on the 4 Gospels at the Council of Nicaea. The companions of the Prophet himself were the ones that gathered and did this, and they were people who memorized the entire Quran from the Prophet based on this oral tradition. So the Quran itself, and this is really important to understand, the written Quran is not the primary source in which the Quran is protected. It is protected through oral transmission. This is used, 1, for people who don't memorize the Quran, and 2, as a crutch for people who memorize it to go back and be reminded if their teacher isn't there. But I guarantee you, when they finish a printing of Quran, they send it to people who memorize the Quran orally to check it. They don't check it against other Qurans. They send it to several huffaz, or the people who memorize the Quran, and they will look at it. Imam al-Qurtubi tells a very interesting story in his tafsir, in his commentary on the Quran, under the words when the Quran says, "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun." We have revealed this reminder, and we have taken it upon ourselves, meaning God. It's like a royal weed in Arabic. And we have taken it upon ourselves to protect it. Imam al-Qurtubi says that there was a Jewish man who wanted to find out from the 3 traditions about their books. And so he took a Torah and he copied the entire Torah in Hebrew. And he put mistakes in it specifically. He went to a rabbi and he gave him the Torah and he asked him to read the entire Torah and tell him if it was a good addition. When he came back, the man said it was an excellent addition, even though he knew there were mistakes in it. When he went to the Christian, he did the same thing with the Gospels. And the Christian also said that it was an excellent edition of the Gospels. He did the same thing for the Quran, and he went to a Muslim scholar and asked him to read it, and he had his mistakes in there, and the Muslim scholar told him when he came back, "You have to burn this because there's mistakes in it." Now, if this is like an apocryphal story or a hagiograph, I don't know, it's historical validity, but I think the point is very well made, that the Muslims really do view, and rightly and justifiably so, as a book that is preserved since this early time. Now, in terms of what exists today, the Quran any doubt by even the consensus of Orientalists, have several parts of the Quran from early 1st century Islam. There would be some debate amongst Orientalists whether there's actually an edition of the Quran that goes back to this original Uthmani edition. The Muslims would say that there are 2, possibly 4. There is a copy now which is called the Samarkand copy, or Samarkand, which used to be southern Russia, which is now in Tashkent. And it is definitely a 1st century, but is it one of the original Uthmani? The Muslims believe it is. And there's also one in Egypt that definitely goes back to the year 68 after Hijrah. Without a doubt, it's on gazelle leather, which lasts an incredibly long time. And then you also have an edition which is in Najaf in Iraq, which is says at the end of it, and it's written in an authenticated Kufic script from that first period. It says at the end that this was written by Ali, the 4th Caliph. So that we do have original text from this first period. But even if we didn't, there's no doubt in a Muslim scholar's mind, and the vast majority of Orientalists that have really examined the situation, like R.A. Nicholson in his book called The Literary History of the Arabs. He was a Cambridge scholar, teacher of A.J. Arbery, who translated the Quran or interpreted it into English. Nicholson says there's really no doubt about the authenticity, the historical authenticity of the Quran. He believes in the revelation, but he is accepting that the book is intact in terms of its historical authenticity. That this is the book that this original community was hearing and was seeing. And so I'm just going to end it there and open it up for some, just if there.
Yeah, we read today in the introduction, and you've made reference to it too, about the use of we when God is speaking. And you said that it's like the royal we. Is that the only interpretation?
In the Arabic language, it's called al-jam'u liman yu'azzimu nafsahu, which means the plural of the one who's exalting himself. So, from an Arab's perspective, if God's using it, it's acceptable. But when an individual uses it, it's arrogance. And you do find individuals in the Arab world that'll say, "Nahnu akalna kathiran al-yawm." You know, we ate a lot today, and he's talking about himself. And it's actually it's considered bad manners.
But this is the way it's
absolutely. It's never seen as indicating more than one God. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to imply that.
What's that?
I didn't mean to imply that.
No, I know, but
some other
Mormons, for instance, do believe that the we in the Old Testament is used to mean a multiplicity of gods. And some of the Christians have believed that the we of the Old Testament was used also to indicate the Trinity, for instance. I mean, there are many, you'll find this in many books, Christian books. For the Jews understand the same way that the Arabs do. It's just a plural that's used majestically. Nahnu, it's a stronger. If I say ana, now the interesting thing about the Quran to me, and Cleary points this out, I think it's a really valid insight. Cleary says that one of the really interesting things about the Quran is that the shift of perspectives. Because sometimes, the Quran is saying, I, la ilaha illa ana, there's no God but I. Sometimes, la ilaha illa anta, there's no God but you. Sometimes, la ilaha illa huwa, there's no God but He. So it's shifting constantly, this change in perspective. And it's a very fascinating phenomenon in the Quran. Any other questions?
Because we have this business in England about Polypeck and Azul Nadir. And I understood that somebody released the Tashkent Quran were pinched by his wife. Well, they ended up in her possession. Do you know anything about
Yeah, they say that a few of the leaves were stolen. And they also say, interestingly enough, in the Treaty of in 246, the Article 246, one of the conditions of surrender to the Germans was that they would return the Uthmani copy of the Quran that was in their trust from the Ottomans. And that's a